Yay. Now I was streamed to Facebook. Okay. We are welcoming people in. And I was just, because we have 3 people, I anticipate that our meeting today might be a little long. So I'll just go ahead right now. Okay. Welcome to our brown bag today. This is for parents of people with diabetes. We're saying classes in session. And we have, oh, well, I'll introduce our panelists in a second, but if you're new to DPAC, we are an organization who stewards a group of advocates across the country and trains them and gives them all the resources they need in order to advocate with their legislators for legislation that helps people with diabetes. So we train people to become advocates, and then we also help train lawmakers. We educate them on issues related to people with diabetes. Here are our social media on the bottom. If you haven't already followed us, please give us a follow. We'll be posting clips from this later today, and I wanted to update everyone that our brown bags are also streamed to YouTube now, in addition to Facebook. Yay. Okay, so we have our 3 speakers, and I'm actually just going to stop sharing so that you can see everyone's faces. So first we have Chandra Kim. Chandra has been involved in diabetes advocacy since 2008 when her daughter Taylor was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Fun fact, she was actually one of the first people to incorporate accommodation of a service animal in the regular education system in the state of Hawaii. Which is where she's coming from today, but they lost her luggage on the way here. So thank you for joining us on a difficult day such as today. Kerry Murphy has a deep personal connection to type 1 diabetes as well. Several of her family members, including her daughter and her husband, have type 1 diabetes, and 2 of her sons have tested positive for T1 antibodies. Kerry also founded the organization Follow T1Ds, which she will tell us more about soon. And lastly, we have Hunter Limbaugh. Hunter is the DPAC board chair. Hunter previously served as a member of the South Carolina House of Representatives and later the chair of the board at the ADA, among other crazy accomplishments. Hunter became involved with diabetes after his daughter was diagnosed, and he has been an active volunteer and advocate ever since. Thank you all for joining us today. We have a great panel today. I'll get started with our questions. Our first question is, you are all parents of people living with diabetes. Can you each tell me a little bit about your child's experience with diabetes?
Kerry, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Amanda, thank you for having me here today. My daughter, Violet, is 10. She's starting 5th grade on Monday. She was diagnosed at 3, a couple weeks before her 4th birthday. And as you mentioned, her dad, he was diagnosed at 37. His sister was diagnosed at 12, her daughter at 2. And as you said, we have 2 adult sons with antibodies and a sister-in-law with type 3C diabetes, which is a whole nother webinar. Because our daughter was because our niece was diagnosed so young, we were able to recognize Violet's symptoms early and avoid DKA. This also enabled us to take a detour to Target to buy her everything she wanted because we knew it was coming ahead in the hospital. I believe seeing her dad and her other family members live and manage type 1 diabetes has really helped her come to terms with her diagnosis at every stage of her development so far. And I really hope that that continues as she grows.
Go ahead, Chandra.
I'm Chandra. Like Amanda said, my daughter was diagnosed at the age of 7 in 2008. So she's gone through elementary, middle, high, and then college, and now she's in a workforce. And I also have my niece, Kerry, who was diagnosed almost 3 years ago, and she just started preschool last week. So she is entering this whole topic that we're talking about today. So good timing.
And my daughter, Leah, who I think may be out there in the audience somewhere, actually. Hello, if you are. She was diagnosed in 2001 when she was 6 years old. And so, we've been through, she has been through, and we have been with her, the journey for almost 24 years now. So we have gone through the elementary school and middle school and high school and undergrad and graduate school and working and the whole gamut with her so far. And it's, anyway, we'll talk more about it. It's been a trying experience, a rewarding experience. It's been all kinds of different things. And I'm glad to be here, glad to help a little if possible. And one quick thing, I just want to make sure that I get this said, and that is that nobody here is intending to tell anybody how to deal with this situation, because everyone's journey is different. So this isn't a how-to by any means. Although we do hope that, there'll be some things that are said that can be considered and y'all might find helpful, but don't get the impression that any of us think that we know how to do this, because there is no how to with type 1 diabetes. But thanks for being here.
Thank you. Leah dropped in the chat that she is here.
Oh, good. Hi, Leah.
Thank you for that. For those of you who, all of you who have gone through the school system with diabetes, what hurdles have you faced, and how did you navigate that? And how did your child navigate school with diabetes?
I'll go ahead
I'll
and start
start.
again.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead, Chandra.
Okay. All right. So really, to work off of what Hunter just said, like, I use the 504s to educate our educators about type 1 diabetes. My philosophy is we know so much about it, and I don't wish anyone else knowing about it and having to know about it. So the fact that a lot of people say, like, oh, I don't really know a lot about type 1. Yes, and you're so lucky. But here, now that you have somebody who's involved, we're going to have to, get you up to speed, and you're going to learn along with us. We're all learning together. But when you're at the school, it really is about working, as a partnership with the teachers, with the administration. The health aide is going to become your best friend. And you're also trying to teach your child how to be empowered and how to advocate for themselves as they grow up and become adults, because they're going to have to do this, for the rest of their life until there's a cure. So, I think having people learn about it, but it is not something that you can sit down for, an hour even. An hour is not enough time to figure out all of the ins and outs on scenarios that could happen and steps to care for the highs and lows. So it's a constant learning thing. And so having a good foundation with the school and a good relationship, I think that is one big hurdle that is very important.
So over the last 6 years, we've encountered many hurdles with our school district. I'm going to summarize a few systemic issues that I've faced and that other parents are experiencing nationwide. And Chandra, I do agree with you. Relationship with the school is pivotal. And I think so many of us parents wish we were able to have a better relationship with our school districts, especially around diabetes. It's always the goal, but sometimes, things just don't go the way we hope they are. We hope they will. So a couple of the common hurdles that I've seen is that school districts often champion outdated policies on diabetes management because they don't fully grasp the safety and legal ramifications of not implementing the current standards of care. So this is forcing parents to educate the school district on laws and diabetes management. And as you can imagine, that's not always welcomed. Another hurdle is parents often face endless meetings, emails, and calls with school districts, sometimes for months, just to get their child's medical needs met. Many districts will delay meetings with parents until right before school starts. And if the school refuses to accept the requested accommodations, this forces the child to start school without a plan, and it's unsafe. Even if parents do succeed in getting these accommodations for their own child, it rarely translates into access for other students requesting the same accommodation, many having already been proven reasonable for students with diabetes, and some even by the Department of Justice. And another important thing that I like to raise awareness about is that for many parents, the stress of dealing with non-compliant school districts can be worse than the emotional strain of the initial diagnosis. It's shocking because during the grief process of having your child newly diagnosed, us parents, we can't imagine anything worse until we're forced to leave our child with a school that flat out refuses to meet our child's medical needs. And this struggle and resulting trauma is happening to families across the country, not all, but some, and it's unnecessary and avoidable. And lastly, to answer the question about how we navigated this for Violet, we did this by eliminating the middleman as soon as possible. We started using DIY Loop while homeschooling during COVID. And so when she returned to school at the end of second grade, I didn't have to negotiate her medical care with the school district. I focused lessons on reading and math, so she could read texts and follow my directions remotely. And this resulted in her being marked as self-managing with my supervision on her medical order. We only rely on the school to remote monitor and respond to audible alerts and to step in when she or I ask for help. And our school is fantastic at doing that. This is the only way that I could assure she was safe at school, and I made it work for us. But it has taken significant personal and familial sacrifice. And this is how I know that most parents can't and should not have to do what I've done the past 6 years. I know parents have careers and jobs, other obligations, small kids to care for during the school day, and schools have an obligation to keep our kids safe in our absence. But the resistance to updating diabetes management and policies and to voluntarily following federal laws has left our kids vulnerable to emergencies. And this really, truly makes it impossible for many parents to trust that their kids are truly safe at school, and many of them aren't.
Yeah, I'll go pretty quickly. And it's important, I think, to keep in mind that this was what I'm talking about primarily was, more than 2 decades ago. So I think that things have changed somewhat for the better, generally speaking, in terms of the awareness that school districts have, and with regard to their legal responsibilities and moral responsibilities and all those things. But, that said, it varies widely, I think, across the country, how good any particular school or school district or state handles these things. We were in a position, thankfully, where, our personal situation was that my wife went to school, at least once a day, to give Leah her injections and check her blood sugar. I mean, she was 6 years old, and we could do that. I don't know what the hell we would have done if we hadn't been able to do that ourselves. And it got better over time. The technology improved over time. We were not, I say we, Leah, but we were not early adopters of technology, whether it's the pump or CGMs or whatever. I mean, everything has been adopted since then. But, it was kind of back in the Stone Age, sort of dealing with type 1 diabetes with, multiple daily injections and 1+ ultras and 1-touch ultras and, and that sort of thing. It's a lot easier now, at least in that regard, which is good. But all I can suggest is, communicate first, go talk to the people at the school. You may be surprised at how cooperative they'll be. If they're not, you just raise your voice a little higher and higher and higher. And if push comes to shove, there are lawyers that will take these cases on a contingency basis. And it's happened more than once. There are organizations, whether it's the ADA, DPAC doesn't sue people, DLC doesn't sue people, but the Disability Rights Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of organizations out there that take this stuff seriously. Not that we don't, it's just not what we do, to get people's attention when necessary.
Thank you. That was really, thank you for all of you for saying that. One person in the comments was saying that they're one of the parents who found the trauma of grief of sending their child to school worse than the initial diagnosis as well. As someone who grew up with diabetes, but of course doesn't have the perspective of a parent, I am really shocked to hear that. And that, I think that will stick with me. Thank you for giving me that perspective and making me realize how terrifying that whole experience is. Kerry, can you tell us a little bit more about your organization, Follow T1Ds? And I know you mentioned all the big topics that you dealt with. Is that something that the other parents in that organization also deal with?
Yeah, again, first, I want to thank you and DPAC for giving me the opportunity to share about Follow T1Ds and what we've been doing. It's really a wonderful opportunity, so thank you. We started a little more than a year ago. We are a parent-led nationwide organization advocating for students with type 1 diabetes. Any parent who finds themselves advocating for proper diabetes management at their child's school is one of us. We advocate for schools to follow CGMs remotely, follow parent input, and follow federal law. We want to provide parents with the tools they need to advocate for their schools to comply with existing federal laws, laws which override state laws and school district policies. We advocate for schools to use the most current standards of care so that all students with diabetes can be medically safe and have access to a free, appropriate public education. So federal laws, they apply in every state. So no matter where a child lives, we also believe they should have access to all of the reasonable accommodations they need for their diabetes at school. We also recently launched our website, which has a lot of great advocacy resources for parents, schools, and providers. So to answer your question, the 3 things I summarized earlier, those are like 3 huge hurdles that seem to be repetitive nationwide. To be more specific about what's happening inside of those hurdles, I have a couple of examples. So many school districts, they have policies that ban or unnecessarily restrict remote monitoring by school staff. This is also referred to as blanket care, which under the laws, as I understand them, are supposed to be individual. So you're not supposed to be able to have a blanket ban or blanket allowance or force somebody to do something under this law. Some schools have tasked children as young as 4 with self-reporting their CGM alarms to an adult. It's hard not to make comments after each one of these, but I'm not going to do it. Students can miss up to an hour of class, maybe more than an hour of class daily for scheduled CGM checks in the clinic, which could be done remotely. I will make a comment here. Scheduled CGM checks means in places in the DMMP where the provider has indicated the child's blood sugar should be in a particular target before participating in the upcoming activity. So that would be PE, bus ride, dismissal, testing, any of those times, children are being forced to get up, walk to the nurse's office for the nurse to touch their personal medical device and make sure they're in target range and then send them back to class if they don't need treatment. That process of getting up, stopping the activity, walking back and forth, it can be up to an hour or more a day. Even when doctors confirm that parents should provide input in prescribed areas of the medical plan, unfortunately, parents are still often dismissed. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, One of the biggest issues I've seen is that many schools continue to rely on outdated policies and diabetes management methods. Kind of speaking to what Hunter just brought up. 30 years ago, when my sister-in-law was in school, the standard of care relied on someone recognizing the signs and symptoms of physical distress already in progress. And while I still think, these are very important to teach and recognize, I believe that solely relying on that reactive approach is negligent. When we now have tools that provide proactive measures to prevent the physical distress that those signs and symptoms cause. The old practices and policies that school districts claim to be robust simply don't support the protocols that we need in order to safely implement the current standards of care. And these are standards of care that didn't exist 30 years ago, but they're also changing every year, like rapid acting insulins, closed loop pumps, CGMs, and more. So it's troubling to me that school districts often refuse to acknowledge parents' concerns about this. And, I'm left questioning how it can be that school districts are unwilling to adjust policies that could safeguard students with life-threatening conditions and ensure that they have an equal education.
Oh, wow, thank you so much. People are.
Can I add on to what
Thank
Kerry was
you.
talking about?
Oh yeah, go on.
So you had mentioned the loss of time, that they're, about an hour, that they're always checking on stuff. So Taylor, when we were discussing with the administration and everything, Taylor actually didn't have to take PE. And that was the school's decision. And the school's decision was because they were not sure that they would be able to keep her safe while they're out doing strenuous activities and all of that. And she is active, was active outside of regular school PEs. So they knew that she was still getting her physical education. But yeah, they actually just, as the school, they decided, all right, no, she's not going to do PE because we don't have the facilities to, and I'm talking mental facilities, to take care of it. And to me, that kept her safe. And I was very grateful that they had done that. So having the discussion with the school, they may be willing to propose some things to you that you can live with. Do I want her to actually miss out on PE? No, but like I said, she was already active in other things. So I knew she was getting the activities. But if I was to look at no, I want her to have the exact same curriculum as everyone else in her, level, I would have been creating something that the school was like, oh, I don't know if I'm too sure about it. So I did allow it to not happen. And then also, how it's them leaving the classroom to do their testing or, administer insulin and stuff like that. In some cases, the child themselves wants to be private. And so it's like, well, they can do it in the classroom, but should they choose, let's agree that they can do it outside. And so that's something that did work with Taylor throughout her elementary. She was very private and didn't do anything in the classroom. And then towards intermediate, same thing. She had gone to a new district, new people. She didn't know, a single person on campus. So she was weary. And then by high school, she was like, I just do everything in front of everybody. She didn't care. So we also got to read, we got to read our kids and figure out what's best for them.
Yeah, sorry, we're just coming up a little bit short on time, so I'm going to continue with the questions.
Wow.
People who are asking, sorry, no, it's not your fault. People who are asking, we will share Kerry's information, her organization information, so we can all get connected with Follow T1Ds. So the next question is, outside of school, there's extracurricular activities, hangouts with friends, sleepovers, part-time jobs, dates, birthday parties, and more. How have you made sure your child is taking care of their health, but still experiencing that normal childhood? And what role have you played in this dynamic?
I'll go real quickly. And it's not super dissimilar to the whole dynamic with the schools, and because what it always seems to come down to is education. And, so from the time Leah was really old enough to start, doing other things, let's say late elementary school into middle school and that sort of deal. It was mostly just educating both her friends and her friends' families, the families, in whose homes she might be visiting or spending the night, or even going on a, overnight trip or something, with whatever it happened to be. So it's really that simple. Making sure that people that she's with, who are going to be responsible for her safety, understand what they're being responsible for, are willing to agree to it, and are, know what to do in any given circumstances. So, we tried, like I'm sure most everybody does, to create a world in which she could live as, I don't want to use the word normal, but I'll scare quote it, life as all of her friends. It takes a little work, but it's definitely doable.
I think a big tip to give people on that aspect is really reassure, your child's friends, but also their parents, or, if they're with someone, let them know, if you have any questions, I'd rather you call me and ask, because we can resolve it in 30 seconds instead of you stressing out for, 20 minutes. And 20 minutes in a low is, it is crucial. It's important. So don't be afraid to just contact us, because I would rather get a contact and solve the problem than to think like, oh, everything's honky-dory, when actually, your child's been in the ER because, something happened. So just reassuring people that it's doable, I'm reachable, we can get this, and the child will have fun, you'll have fun, everyone will have fun, it'll be okay.
I'll try to keep my answer brief here. For us, Violet's only 10, so we haven't like transitioned to, full independence yet, like the other two panelists have. For us, she's able to read and text, and so a lot of, I used to have to follow her around everywhere. And now our care is a little bit more remote. And I think for us, my main focus is to help ingrain diabetes decision like in her, so that, as she's eating the same foods, I'm constantly just like reiterating, it's this many carbs over this amount of time. And, my hope is that one day she's just gonna be full teenager and just be like, I know, Ma, I know a Clif Bar is 25 carbs. And that's when I'll know that my brainwashing has worked. And she's ready to, start just like making her own decisions. But I do make her a part of everything. I purposely try to interrupt her every time there's a diabetes decision. And my hope is that this will help her leave time around her activities as she grows, so that, starting and stopping a task is less difficult for her than the average person. And that's something that's very hard for me. I'm not good at switching gears. So I really try to focus on like, giving her that like frustration now of like, I have to stop this to do this, and then jump back in and be there to support her while she handles all those feelings. So it's a little bit more natural for her.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing that. When I was 12, I knew someone who also had diabetes, whose mom never let him out of her sight, literally ever. So he had never hung out with a friend without her, I guess. And that to me was like very much on one end of the spectrum, and I was on the other, where I was just going anywhere at any time. And it really goes to show that it's whatever the parent is comfortable with. And I mean, he turned out fine, I'm sure. But on that note, I was going to ask about towing that line, which is your child's day-to-day well-being is largely your responsibility, of course, but at the same time, diabetes can't really fully be controlled. And ultimately, diabetes, it's only really experienced by the child themselves. And so that being said, how do you find the balance between engaging in that oversight of their diabetes, or parenting when it comes to diabetes, versus laying off and letting them handle their day-to-day? And when do you step in? And as a
I think
subsequent
knowing
question,
their schedule, I think knowing what they're doing during the day. Because you as a parent, you're always monitoring, and then you see the trends, and we're very lucky now that we can see trends. So then we can just interject and be like, hey, don't you have PE this afternoon? Your number's going, a little low. Let's get it up a little bit. So it's just trying to keep them, but not being like, oh my gosh, you have PE. I need to be there every time you have PE, just in case something happens. So it's just watching, which is junk because we're always, again, watching and hovering. But also, emphasizing to the school that type 1 does not behave or follow rules. I mean, it never does. So you don't want your child to be stigmatized as being like, oh, they can't maintain their stuff. It's the disease. They can't control the highs and lows. I mean, sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. And it is their fault sometimes. And most times, it's type 1s. It's that half a child attached to your child. It's type 1's fault.
That reminds me of how much I despise a term that you don't hear anymore. And I don't even know for sure exactly what it was referring to, but it was a brittle diabetic.
Yeah.
And that was just, to me, just the worst way to describe somebody. And anyway, but I digress.
what does that mean? What does that refer to?
I mean, I'm not sure at the time. You never hear it anymore. But I can only assume, because if you're talking about type 2, it just doesn't fit to me. So I'm assuming that it was some reference to people with type 1 and the difficulty of dealing with it. But I don't even know. I don't hear it anymore.
I think it's people who are, because Taylor was labeled as a brittle diabetic.
Yeah.
And it was because she her body was insulin resistant, so it didn't matter how much insulin we were giving her, she would ride high. And so it was that her body had some sort of issue, and you had to watch it carefully. And I mean, the name doesn't sound right. I don't like the name.
No. Just on the question, again, as I said at the outset, there's no right answer to this. It's also dependent on the individuals involved, both the child with diabetes and the parents and their personalities and just lots of factors. But I do think, like in our family dynamic, and maybe this will be helpful, I'll just describe what ours was. In general, I'm an obsessive when it comes to this stuff. I mean, I also got deeply involved in the whole diabetes thing when my daughter was diagnosed. Immediately got involved with ADA, doing volunteer work, was around, diabetes educators and the world's foremost experts on diabetes all the time, and blah, blah, blah. So I was just like immersed in diabetes stuff and was obsessive about how Leah was taking care of herself or not taking care of herself. And my wife, not that personality at all. She cared, and she paid attention. And I think I kind of drove Leah nuts to a certain extent. If I had it all to do over again, I would probably be less compulsive about it. And but that's just the way we are, the way we were. I learned. I told y'all on our little pre-call the other day that I called the cops on her twice. Once when she was an undergrad and wasn't responding to my calls or text messages when she was in college, and once when she was working and living by herself out of state, and same thing, was not responding. And I did what Dad had to do, and she did not find it amusing at all to have police knocking on her door. But it's just kind of part of the deal. Nobody asked for it. You do the best you can at every stage, and don't beat yourself up about it. It's hard.
I agree, it is hard. Um, for us, again, we're still kind of new in this transition of care to an extent. My daughter calls me her full-time pancreas, and we actually just recently talked about what that means as she grows up. And I was telling her that I will be her full-time pancreas until she demotes me to part-time pancreas, and I will be her part-time pancreas forever. And if she ever needs me to come back full-time, I'm there. And then another, thing that I do that might be helpful for other people is, I promised myself I would never say no if she asked to participate in her care. So what that means is that, for some reason, the only time she wants to change her pump is at 11:47 p.m. when it expired, and we forgot, or, something happens and she's like, I want to do it. And, who am I to say, I can do it faster. It's just going to be more inconvenient if you do it. And, I have said those things, but I always let her win. So I never say no. And it needs to take as long as it takes as her mind processes how to do those things for herself. And I'm going to be there and support it, even if it's even more inconvenient than diabetes itself because of the time of day or whatever. The world doesn't stop. So I'm going to let her participate.
Have any of you, I know, Hunter, you are talking about tracking your daughter's blood sugars probably through Dexcom Follow. Do you guys have experience, or there's some secret third thing? But do you guys have experience using Dexcom Follow?
Yeah, and especially now with it all on the phone, and that's something that is brought up a lot through the 504s is kids having access to their phone. So in a way that's easy because before, the olden days, they had the CGM, but we didn't have follow. So we, parents at home still didn't know what was going on, on campus. So it was still very much like, telephone call and them telling you what their numbers is. But yeah, I don't really even think it's not us monitoring it, but it's them having the equipment. And, like I said, it's the phone. They can do their insulin on the phone and they can check their glucose levels on the phone. And so the school's saying, okay, yes, this is now, it's not a iPhone, it's a medical device and they can have it with them. On the flip side, we as parents cannot abuse them having their phone. You can't, text them and be like, I miss you so much. It is truly a medical device. You're going to contact them for diabetes stuff. And the teachers have gone to Taylor and be like, what are you doing on your phone? And she'll say like, oh, my mom, this and that. And I says, if you have to show the phone to say like, look, we're talking diabetes here, then at least they're, it does get into their head. Like, it's like, no, when she uses it, it really is. But yeah, as a parent, you cannot abuse them having the phone. Don't tell them that they're gonna, they gotta cook rice when they come home. That's a Hawaii thing. Cook rice when you come home.
Let me add one quick thing to the not abusing. It's a little different from what you're talking about, Chandra, but it's related. Leah was a little older when she first got the CGM. I can't remember exactly. She may have been in grad school. She may have been, I think she was. Anyway, so she was a little older by the time she got it. And this is a comment on my own learning to deal with that technology. I think it's important, depending on the age of the child, to be careful how you allow that information that's available to you to create bad habits with the parents. And I was bad about it. I mean, I would look at her blood sugar many, many, many times a day. Very unhealthy for my own mental health, not good for her. You know, she didn't need to be, not that I did this all the time, she didn't need to be hearing from me, hey, your blood sugar is 220, what's up, you know, or your blood sugar is 85, you better, you know, keep an eye on it, or whatever it may be. But just having the ability to know at all times what her blood sugar is was a mixed blessing that I had to learn how to deal with. I don't ever look at it anymore. I follow her. She graciously still allows me to do that, but all I get are urgent lows. I mean, I can still see it all the time. I just don't look. But that has taken a lot of very difficult discipline in myself to learn. So just a little word of advice: just be careful how you use it, particularly as they get older. But I'm so thankful to have the technology and the ability to, you know, get the urgent low notifications, because that's really, you know, when push comes to shove, that's what I need to get.
I want to piggyback on that. I love how you're talking about looking at her numbers all the time, which we all do from, you know, depending on what the situation is, the age of your kid, the event, right? But then you said you don't do that anymore, but you do follow her. And that's a really important point, because that's what parents are asking schools to do. The parents are saying, we don't want you to look at the numbers. We want you to use the follow app to get alarms so that you can, you know, be alerted that this child needs attention where they are. And, you know, of course, this is my favorite question of all of them, Amanda, because, and again, I'll try to keep it brief, but you know, this is something I've been working on for 6 years. My advocacy is around the Follow app, you know, or whatever it's called for any other, you know, CGM manufacturer that allows a caregiver app. But I believe that CGM data is the most important tool next to insulin. Seeing CGM data remotely, it's critical to my ability to manage Violet's diabetes remotely at school and when she's away from me. And, you know, if something were to happen to me, I know the school is going to get an alarm on that Follow app and respond. But unfortunately, many parents don't have this safety net because many school districts are refusing to use the Follow app. Those school districts, they're ignoring the Department of Justice, that the Department of Justice interprets remote monitoring by schools as a reasonable accommodation, and dates as far back as 2020, when Connecticut attorneys Bonnie Roswick and Jonathan Chappell were able to secure mandates from the Department of Justice requiring for school districts to use remote monitoring to remain compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. The DOJ reinforced this obligation in a case attorney Roswick worked on just 2 months ago. Attorneys Roswick and Chappell have graciously helped provide guidance to many of our Follow T1D's parents across the country this past year, and they created a template for parents to file their own administrative DOJ complaint about remote monitoring and any other associated issues. And that is available on our website, followt1ds.org.
Thank you. We will definitely include that in our information after. Sorry, we're just so over time, so I'm going to ask my one last question. And all of your children are so lucky to have parents who are this involved and sensitive to these topics. What words of wisdom do you give your own children about their experience navigating diabetes every day? And what advice, I know Hunter, you just gave some, what advice would you give to other parents about parenting a child with diabetes?
I'll go first. The biggest takeaway that I would hope people would have from today is that it's going to be okay. It's a tough road in some ways, but you know, thankfully it's a manageable disease. It takes work, but everyone will get through it. And there are lots of resources available, whether it's in a school context, ADA's got good stuff. Beyond Type 1 has good stuff. There are resources available for parents to look at and how to manage these things in relationships with schools. But just having gone through, you know, the little kid to the adult, the whole shebang, it's going to be okay. There are people out there who can help and want to help. And while I would never wish this on anybody, I think it's also important to try to keep in mind that there are positives that come out of this unfortunate reality. And and I'm speaking only my personal experience and with Leah, the amount of, you know, responsibility and discipline and the other, there's another word that I'm forgetting. Yeah, well, maturity. Yeah, was the other one. They're demanded. Those things are demanded of these kids as they go through this process. And those are skills and attributes and mindsets that, you know, they're not just limited to handling their diabetes. They translate into every aspect of their lives. And, you know, that's a good thing. Not a good way to have to obtain those qualities, but they can't help but obtain them. And I think you'll all notice that they're different from their peers in some respects, some important respects, and in a positive way. So God bless all of you. Good luck.
So I'll jump in next. Again, my daughter's now, she'll be 24 in a couple of months. So she's an adult. She's maintains herself. But I'm very comfortable with her maintaining herself because I've always involved her in self-advocating. She needs to be able to look at things and decide, all right, what do I need? What do I want? And I will ask for it. And if it's within the law and they say no, then she thinks, do I really want it right now? Is this worth the fight? So not every fight is worth it at that moment. I mean, every fight is definitely worth it, but is it worth it at that moment? So don't tackle everything at once. That I will say that's one thing. Another thing is she did have a diabetic alert dog on campus with her. So that was a little bit different. We had to add that in. That's a whole nother topic, but it is something that we did include in the 504. And I look at today as not being like, we weren't here to list down like all the things that you could ask for, because that's all available online, but it is about, I don't know, the personal side of it on how we're going to deal with getting those things for our families. The other thing that wasn't discussed at all is when you have multiple medical conditions, as well as type 1, something else. Whereas, Taylor had seizures. So we had to include that and be like, well, sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, the seizure will trump anything diabetic. We have to, this one goes into play. So there are things that, sometimes it's not going to be, the regular, she's low, so we're going to try and shove, sugar in her mouth. No, we got to deal with other things. So taking those things into consideration as well, creating the situations. And probably my biggest, and this was something that my husband and I discussed before, but we told the schools, like, if we're unreachable and there is an emergency that you are in fear, please call 911. I want it where, you didn't sit back and you didn't wonder and then something happened. And, my bad, I didn't answer my phone for whatever reason, I could be dead, but please call 911. So they knew, they had that little bit in their back of their mind that they knew that they didn't have to solve the problem alone. That's my advice.
I love all those. I'm typically very good at giving unsolicited advice and solicited advice, but I love this question also because I have a little story about it that I have used to help other parents whose children have been diagnosed and to help parents with themselves. And so I'm just going to tell you about that story instead of giving my other tips. But if you want more tips, by all means, email me. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. So there's a mantra my daughter and I live by. It doesn't matter. You have to do it anyways. When she was in the hospital at diagnosis, the nurses insisted I administer my first shot, and I was not ready. There were too many people. There was too much fear. And my daughter was literally like crawling up the back of the hospital bed. They were ready to hold her down, urging me to just do it. But I ferociously told them, back off. And instead, I sat down and I assertively spoke to my 3-year-old. I told her, you can kick, you can scream, you can say all the bad words that you want. You can even pinch me as a distraction, which, by the way, she still does to this day. But no matter how much she wished that I didn't have, I'm sorry, no matter how much she resisted or how much I wished I didn't have to cause her pain, she had to sit still and do it anyways. It wasn't about ignoring her feelings. Her fear and anxiety matters. But in that moment, nothing could get in the way of the shot she needed to live. I was teaching her that no matter how scared or angry or sad she felt, diabetes doesn't wait. The world does not stop. You have to do it anyways. So I often get asked why I have like a little circle bruise on the most sensitive part of my underarm. And I don't know how she knew at 3 how bad that would hurt, but she did. And she knows now and she still does it there. So I'm like, I'll take it because I know what pain you're going through. And if it helps you out, then fine. So just to finish up, as a parent, I soon learned there was a huge lesson there for me too. It didn't matter how much it broke my heart to prick my little girl's finger or to push that needle into her tiny arm, how tired I was or how incompetent diabetes math made me feel. It didn't matter that I was the one causing her pain or that she didn't understand why one day she's the apple of my eye and the next day I'm chasing her around with sharp objects to make her bleed. I had to do it anyways. And every day I have to make that impossible choice to hurt her now to keep her safe later, and I still do. And so what I say is, that's how you love a child with diabetes. You do it anyways.
Well, thank you so much. I honestly am feeling emotional right now, talking to people.
I know, I want to
parents.
cry.
I know, I really, really appreciate this. I know we're so much over, but I just also want to say thank you as a person with diabetes. I feel like a tethered, tethered to you and the community. Thank you guys for joining us. And thank you all so much for this, for this talk and for sharing your words of wisdom and advice, and you're helping so many parents and people with diabetes out there. So yeah, thank you everyone for staying 23 minutes over the time. And have a great rest of your day, and we'll be posting everyone's information as well.
Thanks. It's been great to be
Thank
with
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good luck this year.